Hello, welcome to a very special edition of Museum Moments. My name is Ellie Gettinger, and I'm the Education Director at Jewish Museum Milwaukee. Today, we have a guest presenter, and this presenter, Nancy Weiss-McQuide, came to us many months ago with the idea of how do we explore Yiddish in Milwaukee? And we had no one better than Nancy. And she is the expert on this because she's been involved in Yiddish in Milwaukee for so many years, and actually was one of the people who helped ensure that we had a collection related to the display that you're going to see today about Yiddish in Milwaukee. So let me introduce our guest presenter today, Nancy Weiss-McQuide. She is a longtime Milwaukeean who has taken on so many different roles within our performing arts community. She's an actress, she's a choreographer, she's a director. In addition to a mime artist and a dance teacher, she's taught dance at UWM for 13 years and speaks throughout the community on a number of different issues. Within our Jewish community, she is so dedicated to Ovation communities and works a lot with the older adults there. And she also is integral in creating the TAM plays each year, the Torah Academy of Milwaukee Musicals. And she also was a longtime member of the Yiddish Club in Milwaukee. And so without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to Nancy and her lovely presentation about Yiddish in Milwaukee.
Thank you for listening. Yiddish in Milwaukee. There is something magical, even mystical, about the language known as Yiddish. Is there another language so bittersweet, so simultaneously full of humor and sadness, that contains words as funny as kvetch, which means to complain, geschmack, which means delicious, tasty, or nuchschlepper, a third wheel, someone who hangs around uninvitedly, but which also contains hundreds of beautiful sayings and expressions, such as, der vos versteht seine Yiddishkeit is a klieger. He who is aware of his folly is wise. Fortunately, in Milwaukee, Yiddish was to be found from its earliest days, from the earliest days of the city, as Jews arrived in the 1840s, and is present as well in Milwaukee today. Jews in Milwaukee. Jewish people have been living in Milwaukee since the 1840s, preceding Wisconsin's statehood of 1848, and have greatly contributed in all ways to the city's development. A first wave of German Jewish immigration took place from approximately the 1840s to the early 1870s. By 1856, there were some 200 Jewish families here, supporting 3 synagogues. Germans of all kinds were drawn to Wisconsin for various reasons, and Milwaukee became known as the most Germanic city outside of Europe. This early populace of Jewish emigres rapidly assimilated and moved up the socioeconomic ladder in businesses such as real estate, cattle and grain dealers, clothing manufacture, tobaccoists, etc. When the second wave of Jewish immigrants arrived, roughly from the 1880s to the mid-1920s from Eastern Europe, they spoke both the language of their home countries, Russia, Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, Romania, and Hungary, but were also Yiddish speaking, which was quite discomforting to the now well-established German Jews, but who unfailingly assisted them to adjust and prosper in American life. And from this first generation Eastern European wave of laborers, small shopkeepers, peddlers, etc., arose second and third generations of great success in all professions, all businesses, and all walks of life. Here's a little joke to illustrate what I mean. Mrs. Bernstein and Mrs. Frankel are out walking. Mrs. Bernstein has her grandchildren with her. Mrs. Frankel says, "Oi, what beautiful grandchildren you have." "Thank you," says Mrs. Bernstein. "How old are they?" asks Mrs. Frankel. "The lawyer is 3 and the doctor is 5, replies Mrs. Bernstein. I rest my case. Perhaps the most famous of such immigrants was Goldie Maybovich, born in Russia in 1898 and arrived with her family in Milwaukee in 1906, aged 8, and she went on to become Golda Meir, the Prime Minister of Israel from 1869 to 1974. She recalled, ours was a traditional home. The language in the house was Yiddish. We read a Yiddish newspaper every day, and we had Yiddish books. In short, the whole house was run in that language. Golda's mother, Bluma, despite speaking only Yiddish, no English, enterprisingly ran a small neighborhood grocery store serving similar Jewish immigrant families. Having to work in the store during the early mornings made Golda late for 4th Street School, a shanda, an embarrassment for the little girl. When Golda wept over this, Bluma replied, "Vai seine Rebbitzen mit der Tag Specter. You'll be a learned lady a day later." Today, 4th Street School has been renamed Golda Meir School in honor of the Prime Minister. So what exactly is Yiddish? Around the 10th century, Jews from what is now northern France, who spoke Old French and Hebrew, migrated to towns along the Rhine River and began to use the medieval German dialects they encountered. After the 15th century, Jews dispersed into Eastern Europe and Slavic lands, including Poland, Galicia, Hungary, Romania, Lithuania, and Russia, whose languages mixed and mingled with the Judeo-German Yiddish, developing gradually into Yiddish as we know it today, albeit with various regional dialects. It was the language of the Ashkenazic Jews, of their life in the shtetls, the Jewish towns and villages of these countries, the daily parlance used in the Jewish homes, their marketplaces, their communal life, other than in the shuls, synagogues where Hebrew was utilized. It was the Jewish vernacular, serving as a unifier and a protection, as it allowed Jews to be understood amongst themselves, but not by their Gentile, non-Jewish neighbors, who all too often harbored or enacted social and political aspirations for Jewish demise. The Jews spoke the tongue of the country in which they resided, using it as needed with their neighbors, but were differentiated and insulated by their speaking of Yiddish. The Perhift Players, Milwaukee's Yiddish ambassadors to the world. During the early 1900s, Yiddish-speaking immigrants, Jews from Eastern Europe, were fleeing the harsh anti-Semitism and poverty of Europe and came to cities such as Milwaukee. Even as they assimilated here, they, like other populations, Poles, Italians, etc., wanted to maintain connections with the old country. And one way of doing this was by forming ethnic cultural organizations, such as choirs, small orchestras, literary societies, etc. And in 1921, a hardy group of young Jewish emigres initiated the Young Literary Dramatic Society. At first, they presented one-act plays and readings, all in Yiddish, by renowned Yiddish playwrights, such as Sholem Aleichem, Sholem Asch, and Peretz Hirschbein, and soon moved on to presenting full-length plays, the first being in 1923. They rehearsed at the Lapham Park Social Center, then at the Abraham Lincoln House, which became our first Jewish community center in 1931, at which point they changed their name to the Yiddish Drama League, and still later were housed in the Jewish Community Center on Prospect Avenue, being part of its grand opening in 1955 with a production of Riverside Drive. A pause was necessary during the period of World War II, as many members served overseas in the armed forces, but activity resumed and flourished in the post-war years. In 1949, following the death of the revered playwright Peretz Hirschbein, it was decided to honor him by changing the name of the troupe to the Peretz Hirschbein Folk Theater, or Perhift, the Perhift Players. During this era, it gave hundreds of top-quality performances to large audiences who spoke and or understood Yiddish in Milwaukee, including some at the Pabst Theater, and taking small shows and staged readings to Madison, Green Bay, Chicago, and other locales. Perhift became the longest-running amateur Yiddish theater troupe outside of New York in the world. On its 50th anniversary in 1971, it was celebrated in Milwaukee with articles in the Wisconsin Jewish Chronicle, the Milwaukee Journal, and the Forward, a national Jewish Yiddish newspaper. Letters of commendation and congratulations were sent by Milwaukee Mayor Henry Meyer and Congressional Senator William Proxmire. Remember that all the production work of the shows, sets, costumes, lights, sound, publicity, there was no Facebook back then, were done by Perhift members themselves, not paid staff other than some paid directors that they had. All was volunteer participation, as were all community theaters, including the actors, thus requiring a high degree of dedication and commitment. Mr. Howard Weinshell, 1904 to 2008, and Mr. Paul Melrud, 1920 to 2019, both immigrants to Milwaukee at early ages from Eastern European Yiddish-speaking families, were volunteer leaders in all aspects of Perhift, especially as actors, creating many memorable onstage roles. Perhift continued on in various forms into the early 1990s, but due to the decline of Yiddish speakers as actors and those who understood it as audience, it had to take its final bows in the Milwaukee art scene. Yiddish in Milwaukee now. The Yiddish Studies program at the Sam and Helen Stahl Center for Jewish Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee provide courses in English that encompass the history of the language and its vast, rich body of literature. The Stahl Center also presents outstanding programs and speakers on a variety of Yiddish-related topics for the general public. Center Director Professor Joel Berkowitz notes, "It's so important that Yiddish be preserved because the wealth of cultural material created by modern Eastern European Jews is best consumed in its native tongue. Yiddish culture of the past several centuries constitutes one of the great Jewish civilizations." The Shalom Yiddish Club, 2004 to 2017, founded by Mrs. Frieda Levine, Paul Melrud, and Alvin Dink Holtzman, the club was a base of shared Yiddishkeit, friendship, memories, shared culture, amongst Milwaukeeans who grew up hearing and speaking Yiddish. Highlights of the monthly meeting included the making of a DVD in 2012 of their specific experiences with Yiddish in their lives, a large article in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel in 2015 about the intergenerational education program with 8th graders from the Milwaukee Jewish Day School that was done, and the astounding assemblages of homemade kugels at the annual club luncheon. Yiddish speaking in Milwaukee continues today in many of our Orthodox families, who continue to speak it in their family settings, outside of their religious environments. Of course, in the shuls, again, Hebrew is utilized. Such speaking helps to spread and continue the language to younger generations. Why Yiddish? Some might feel that a good way to find the soul of the Jewish people is to imbibe some borscht or matzo ball soup. But there is a better and less fattening method, namely to learn about Yiddish, about its historical and cultural importance, its profound insights, concepts, applications. All are now easily accessible in English and are truly life-enriching. And perhaps most importantly, since it was the tongue, the language of the 6 million. Keeping it alive not only or not just by speaking it, but by having knowledge of it in any form or on any level is a powerful and meaningful way of bearing out never again. Yiddish is a universal language of the Jews due to the diaspora, the Jewish diaspora. It's found almost everywhere in the world. It is rich with literature and humor for all of us to enjoy. Let me give you a little example with a Jewish Yiddish joke in English. It's the little boy's first day of going to public school. He's very excited, as is Mama, and Mama says to him, "So listen, Bubala," that means little boy, little child. "You go to school, you do exactly what the teacher tells you. You sit up straight, you do your homework, you be a good boy." "Yes, Mama." "Bubala, you should not make a fight with the other children. You play nice and play and be a good, polite boy." "Yes, Mama." "Bubala, I don't want you should make any trouble. You work hard, you listen, you do your lessons, you learn." "Yes, Mama." "All right, Bubala, go. Have a good day. He goes, he comes home. Mama says to him, so, Bubala, did you have a good day? Yes, Mama. Bubala, what did you learn? The little boy says, I learned my name is Irving. Yiddish is full of joy and humor and beauty and sadness. Go, dancen, singen, listen, speak Yiddish and enjoy it. Seid gesund, good health to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy Weiss-McQuide. That was amazing. We got such a deep history, both from the sense of what Yiddish looked like 100 years ago and what Yiddish looks like today. And I'll say one of the exciting things is that you don't even need to leave your home to learn Yiddish. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the app Duolingo, but you can just pick that up and they have Yiddish classes on there. There are a huge number of resources online. And as Nancy said, reach out to UW Milwaukee because there's some great stuff there as well. Thanks to Griffin Cusick, who helped produce that video, and also thanks to Jay. As always, I want to thank our supporter, Robin Cohen, who makes these possible. You can learn more about Jewish Museum Milwaukee at jewishmuseummilwaukee.org, or even better, you can visit. Come check us out. We're open 6 days a week. We'd love to see you. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again for another museum moment next week.